Sorry, you don't want me singing that. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And come on in. Absolutely. Welcome to the War Memorial Center. And I serve as the president and CEO. I was appointed to the position January of 2020, just before something happened in our world. It's been quite a couple of number of months. And, you know, early on, one of the things that I'd asked a number of our mental health specialists that I've been working with for a while, with a number of different programs, in particular the Medical College of Wisconsin and the Warrior Partnership, is actually how I got to know Dr. Gregory Burke, is to say, you know, the War Memorial is a place of meeting, of gathering, built 65 years ago next year. And when this community built this place, it was designed to be a place for the community to come together and heal. Of course, you're coming out of the era of World War II in Korea, which is why it was built initially, was to memorialize all those from the community who were killed in action in both of those two massive conflicts, wars. And so that's the spirit of this place. We do have business offices with nonprofits that are here. The Paralyzed Veterans of America Wisconsin, USO Wisconsin, are just a couple of your veteran type organizations that do conduct their business and operations here in the War Memorial. And we do also have meeting space where a lot of our veteran organizations, in fact, George Bander right there with the GI Forum and a member of our board of trustees, they meet here, the Milwaukee Veterans Board of Directors, which makes up 18 of the veteran service organizations in Milwaukee County are conduct themselves here. So we got Groovy right here, Mr. Kokoff from Maverick at the UW Milwaukee, working with our student veterans, Navy veteran himself. So we really want to make this space available. We did have our quarterly meeting earlier today with Dr. Berger and the Southeastern Wisconsin Task Force on Veteran Suicide Prevention. That's made up of 35 plus veteran organizations, to include the state of Wisconsin's Department of Veterans Affairs, the Veterans Affairs Federal, and then Maverick, and et cetera, et cetera. And then we facilitate that, meaning we're the ones who are providing the space. A lot are still participating on Zoom. So those of you who joined us this afternoon, thank you. But this is the work we're trying to do. And this is really going back to the origin of the War Memorial. It's meant to be a place to meet and conduct the business and support our veterans and their families and the community as a whole. And so as we were talking, Dr. Burke and I, a number of months ago, I would say upwards of almost 8-9 months ago, he was talking about sleep. And so that really started the ball rolling on having that discussion. And I myself, I'm an Iraq combat veteran. So it's fascinating because you hear about the nightmares, and which I had when I came home. You don't come back from that horrific experience and not, I shouldn't say that, I'm speaking for myself. So we continued the discussion, and we built it to today. So we really look forward to this. Our friends at Verlo, I know they're not here right now, but they did bring the weighted blankets, and that came up as a discussion, hearing about how that helps with sleep, and whatever the process is with that. It's outstanding. So we thought we would try to provide that also as a complimentary gift from Verlo Mattress. These are weighted blankets. Just to give you the significance, these are about $150 a blanket if you were to buy them in the market. So, and they donated 30 of those in honor and respect of our veterans who may be struggling with sleep. So what I'd like to do now is I will introduce our 4 panelists, and I will serve as the MC. So please, as Dr. Burke will start with a brief introduction on the topic. And then I will give a panel introduction here before he does his full panel, so you can get understanding of the expertise of the panelists that we have here today. And also start to think about some of your questions, because we all sleep, or at least we all try to sleep. And so I think this really is a topic that should impact a lot of us. and or your loved ones, someone that you know closely, and maybe can advise and help them, kind of nudge them in a direction where if maybe they're struggling and they need some help. This is also the family network. So we're going from my far right coming into my left here. So Dr. Gregory Burke is a psychiatrist and founder of Aurora Veterans Program, along with his colleague, Dr. Erich Roush, who is also here. Dr. Burke and Roush established the Veterans Program in 2018 to improve mental health care for military veterans and service members through understanding military culture and how that affects the individual. Dr. Burke served in the United States Marine Corps between 1999 and 2003 and was deployed to Iraq in 2003 for Operation Iraqi Freedom. After his service, I just want to make sure our slides are up so everybody was following along. After his service, he earned a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in biological science, then went on to earn his medical doctorate from Drexel University College of Medicine in 2014. He completed a residency in psychiatry with the Medical College of Wisconsin in 2018. Dr. Peter Grascam is a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Wisconsin. He received his doctorate in clinical psychology from Marquette University in 2006 and has been working at the Milwaukee VA Medical Center since 2008 on the polytrauma traumatic brain injury team. He has a special interest in treating sleep disorders, given the majority of veterans seen by the team report problems with sleep. He has completed national training and certification in the provision of cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, and for us military types, Charlie Bravo Tango India. Dr. Kavita Ratarasarn is an associate professor of medicine at the Medical College of Wisconsin and the section chief for pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine at the VA Medical Center. And actually, at the conclusion of today's discussion, she will be providing a calming, settling program for us to kind of relax and just kind of bring the session to a close. And so very much looking forward to that. We were talking earlier. Dr. Eric Roush helped began establishing veteran-focused mental health treatment at Advocate Aurora Health in 2008, along with Dr. Burke, as I'd stated earlier. The program's goal is to make Advocate Aurora the most veteran-friendly healthcare system in the country. Dr. Roush has been in the United States Army since 2007, 5 years active duty, and in the reserve since 2012. He has served as an armor, signal, and medical officer, and now serves as a psychologist in the Combat Operations Stress Control Unit, which is a unit that's actually specifically in our military units, Army. In his position at Advocate Aurora, Dr. Roush focuses on treating trauma, moral injury, and working with a military population, which includes individual, couple, and group therapy. So, Dr. Burke, if you'd like to start us out with your presentation, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This actually takes the place of our usual sleep class that we have at Aurora. So it's going to be a lot of the same material, but hopefully to a wider audience. Sleep is something that I'm absolutely passionate about. I think that poor sleep drives a lot of the mental illness that we deal with, a lot of our veterans. I always say that it would be unusual if you got out of the military and didn't have a sleep problem because of the sleep deprivation and all the other things that we go through. So I'll keep my part brief because I want to save enough room for everybody to talk. So let's get into it. So as you look up on the screen, how many of those things look familiar? Right? All of the things that you're looking at and a whole bunch more can come straight from sleep deprivation without anything else going on. Next, please. Take a look at what's going on in your body when you're sleep deprived. You're fatigued, you're weak, of course, muscles, brain not working right, but your adrenaline is going to go up, especially if you've been through the sleep deprivation that goes along with military service. You actually get to the point where your body will just jack up the adrenaline. You won't even notice how tired you are. But in the long run, that increased adrenaline is going to increase your blood pressure, increase your heart rate, and can lead to heart disease. Whenever your adrenaline is up, so is your cortisol. And cortisol is your stress hormone. So like any good hormone, it leads to things like increased blood sugar. And over time, that can lead to type 2 diabetes. Leads to weight gain. Cortisol locks your body into storage mode. So anything you eat goes straight into weight, and it makes it almost impossible to lose. Also gives you some pretty bad carb cravings, sugar cravings. Your body's saying, if you're going to be awake, we need fuel. Give me more fuel. And cortisol also likes to suppress the immune system. So when you're stressed out or fight or flight, when you're sleep deprived, that is a stressor. Your body doesn't have enough time or energy to devote to immune response. So it says, let's get through the stress and then we'll deal with that. And the suppressed immune system over time can lead to all kinds of problems, including increased infections and allergies, asthma, even cancer. In fact, a couple of years ago, the World Health Organization came out and they said that third shift work is a probable carcinogen, meaning that third shift workers are predisposed to cancer without any other underlying factors. Similar things are going on in the brain, but let's talk specifically about some of the chemicals. Serotonin is one of your brain chemicals. It's kind of your calm chemical. It's what helps you have patience and tolerance for things, helps you to feel like life is generally okay, like things are manageable. If you're sleep deprived, you don't have enough of it. You either run out of it or didn't have enough to begin with. So it leads to a lot more irritability, feeling on edge, trouble with emotional regulation. So feeling like things are more extreme than they normally would be. You also don't have enough dopamine. Dopamine is your reward chemical. It's what allows you to enjoy stuff. It's also essential for focus and for motivation. So if you're sleep deprived, you don't have enough. And all of those things kind of go down the drain. Trouble focusing, trouble with enjoying things, food tastes like cardboard, life feels like just going through the motions, and you lose all your motivation. Even for stuff that you used to enjoy, you think about it and you're like, nope, not worth it. So what does increase when you're sleep deprived is norepinephrine. That's your brain's version of adrenaline. Pretty much the same thing, one little methyl group different, but you can think of it as your brain's adrenaline. While adrenaline is up in your body, that's your fight or flight chemical for your body. This norepinephrine is the fight or flight chemical for your brain. So it's going to lead to more irritability, anger, anxiety, more fight or flight. This is what normal sleep is supposed to look like for anybody who's curious. This is 8 hours of sleep. It's broken down into different stages. So stage 1 or N1 stands for non-REM 1. This is really just a transition stage between sleep and waking. Should be less than about 5% of the night. So hopefully if you're not waking up too much, which I know most vets are, it should be less than maybe 10 or 15 minutes in a night. Stage 2 is real sleep, but it's light sleep. So this is the stage of sleep where you tend to wake up a lot. Whether it's noise or movement or having to go to the bathroom, whatever. You tend to wake up, roll over, go back to sleep. It's good for the body, not good enough for the brain. Stage 3 is known as deep sleep or slow wave sleep. This is actually the stage when your brain slows down and refuels itself with those chemicals, serotonin and dopamine. This is the good sleep where you're out, things can be going on outside. You could be sleeping next to an artillery battery. I've been there. And you're still out. So this is one of the deep restorative stages of sleep. And this is also the first stage of sleep that you lose when you start having issues with insomnia and other things going on. The last stage of sleep is known as REM, or rapid eye movement. This is when you're having most of your dreams, certainly your most vivid ones. And it's essential for your memory and for your concentration. This is the stage of sleep when most people would notice having nightmares, or it can be disrupted in different ways. So if you put it all together, not all hours of the night are the same. Next. If you have normal sleep architecture and a normal internal clock, you're supposed to get almost all of your deep sleep in the first half of the night, and your REM periods are very short. But halfway through, it flips. In the second half of the night, you get little or no deep sleep, but you get longer REM periods. So for vets especially, but people who are prone to bad dreams and nightmares, it's usually about halfway through the night where you'll consistently wake up. And you wake up with that kind of heart racing, sweating, feeling like something bad just happened. Get up, do your perimeter check your doors, check your windows, right? Try and calm yourself back down before going back to sleep. That's because about halfway through is that first long REM period. First period that's maybe long enough to get into a good nightmare and wake up with that shot of adrenaline. So what most of our sleep looks like is more like that. This was a pretty bad night for me, not the typical. I think it was actually a call night, but you can see how many wake ups. And every time you wake up, you got to start over in light sleep before you can get down into deep sleep. So everybody gets 1 or 2 wake ups for free. But more than that, and it starts eroding your deep sleep. Yep, okay. So there's 2 different mechanisms that drive sleep. One of them is called our circadian rhythm. That's really our internal clock. That's a lot based on light. Your brain's supposed to produce something called melatonin, and most of you have heard of it, right? Well, our brain doesn't start making it actually until about 2 or 3 hours after you stop getting bright lights in your eyes. We'll go a little bit more into it, but the idea would just, let's see, being a vet, between fire watch and night duty and any kind of overseas or deployment, those kind of things tend to break this internal clock. Your brain can't keep up, so it's like a super jet lag. And that kind of thing actually can last for a long time. It doesn't go back to normal just because you're stateside again. So if you don't have this regular circadian rhythm, if your brain's not making the melatonin that it's supposed to be, you're not going to be able to get nearly as much deep sleep, right? Your brain basically has to know that it's nighttime in order to go through those regular sleep stages. The second thing that drives sleep is known as adenosine. I'm sorry for throwing all the technical and chemical names at you, but we'll take it slow. Adenosine is the molecule in your body that tells you how much energy you burned in a day. So all of your cells, brain, muscle, guts, they all run off of something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine is what's left over, so it makes a really good chemical measure of how much energy you burned. This is the thing that actually makes you feel tired. It does pretty much the opposite of everything adrenaline does. So slows down your heart rate, drops your blood pressure, you lose your focus, you lose your energy. It's when you feel you should be sleeping. Funny thing is, caffeine blocks adenosine. So caffeine tricks your body into thinking that you haven't burned any energy. And if you still got caffeine in you, then why sleep? We didn't use any energy. The thing about caffeine is it lasts longer than we think it does. Half-life of caffeine somewhere around 5.5 hours, meaning that 5.5 hours after you stop drinking your coffee or energy drink, half of it's still in you. 11 hours later, a quarter of it is still around. And even though a lot of you, like in the military, we can sleep even with a full pot of coffee in us, it will block deeper sleep. It'll keep you out of those deeper stages. Okay? To say just a little bit more about melatonin, it's made by the pineal gland. It's made from serotonin, funny thing. It's suppressed by light, specifically the higher energy lights like the blues and the purples or violets like that. So basically, if you can see that color blue, your brain thinks that it's daytime, thinks that the sun's still up, and that'll prevent you from producing melatonin. So, you know, our modern society, right? We all like to watch TV and have the lights on and everything before bed. This is going to disrupt your internal clock and therefore interrupt your sleep quality. For those of you who have heard of or have high blood pressure, the standard medication called a beta blocker, it's like metoprolol or atenolol or carvedilol, anything that ends in the all-alls, just about anything, they actually prevent your brain from making melatonin. So, next slide. Melatonin production decreases with age. And you can see that's just a chart from birth to 80 years old on the melatonin production that happens at night. This is not just a matter of aging. What you're looking at now is a CT scan of the brain, CAT scan. What's that bright white spot in the middle? It's actually the pineal gland. The reason that it looks white is because it's calcified. And since melatonin is made by your pineal gland, as it calcifies, it's not able to make as much. So on anybody over the age of 50, pretty much anybody, you're going to see calcification on the pineal gland. And that's what's a matter of aging. That's why people tend to have poorer sleep as they age. More is not better. Physiologically, 3 milligrams is more than 10 times what your brain's supposed to make. Melatonin is not a good sleep medication. Doesn't really help many people fall asleep. Maybe about 1 in 5 people get tired when they take it, but it is absolutely essential to get quality sleep. So people who are taking 5 or 10 or 20 milligrams, I heard the other day, that is way more than what your body needs and what your brain needs. And it's not going to help you get to sleep anymore. What it's going to do is it's going to last too long. It's going to last into the next day. So even the next morning or afternoon, if you're taking 20 milligrams, your brain still thinks it's nighttime. So you end up being more groggy and cloudy after you take it. So this is a picture of a neuron, and I think we're going to just run through this. But basically what happens is every neuron needs these chemicals to fire. And if you're not getting proper sleep, the neuron's going to run out of it. You can just run through the animation. So those chemicals need to trigger the next neuron. That's how neurons talk to each other. That's how your brain's set up. Some of them get recycled and repackaged, but a lot of them float off or get chewed up. So the next time your neuron fires, certainly with sleep deprivation, you may not actually have enough. And that's what I was talking about with the serotonin dopamine depletion that comes with sleep deprivation, is now it may take a couple of times for that neuron to fire to actually get the signal out to the next neuron. What that feels like is you feel like it takes you an extra second to think of something, like you're just behind, kind of like I'm right now. Maybe my mouth's moving faster than my thoughts are. You start having trouble doing math and driving. So that's what sleep deprivation can look like on the micro level. These are your 3 main neurochemicals like I was talking about. Next. This is kind of a stress meter, so how you feel, think of it as like your fight or flight meter. When you're well rested, you're fully stocked serotonin, dopamine, and you don't need the adrenaline nor epinephrine. So you tend to be calmer. You tend to be more focused, enjoy things, calmer in general. When you're sleep deprived, it's exactly the opposite. Not enough serotonin, not enough dopamine. That adrenaline and that norepinephrine go through the roof, especially in vets, just to keep you awake, just to keep you going. Like how many here in the crowd have pulled those 3-4 hour nights and kept going because you had to? Well, that's how your body does it, is it jacks up the adrenaline level. But because adrenaline's your body's fight or flight chemical, and that norepinephrine in your brain, same thing. Now your stress meter, your fight or flight meter is starting at a 5 or a 6, getting into that yellow to orange range right off the bat, just from the sleep deprivation. You also don't have the serotonin that you need to feel like your emotions are manageable. So you tend to get a lot more irritable and on edge, and little things feel like crises. When it comes to PTSD, nightmares and sleep fragmentation are probably the most common symptoms reported. Something like 90%, 70 to 87% of patients report this trouble with sleep when they're diagnosed with PTSD. I think it's actually closer to 100%. I think the 13% that say no problem are good with the 3-4 hours a night. But my opinion, sleep disturbance actually predicts the development of PTSD. That is to say that when you still have sleep complaints, if your sleep hasn't gotten back to normal 1 month after the traumatic event, it's a very strong predictor of developing PTSD. And it also works in the reverse. If your sleep has recovered a month after the event, you are far less likely to develop PTSD. So sleep is protective, even in the case of trauma. Untreated sleep symptoms, as most of you know, can go on for years or decades. They don't go back to normal just because we're stateside, just because we're not doing that military thing anymore, just because we're past the trauma. These things persist. The sleep changes that you see in PTSD, you have increased REM density. Now that doesn't mean better REM sleep. It means it's actually more fragmented and more thrown throughout the night. I'll let one of my colleagues talk more about that. More brief awakenings, more shifts from REM to non-REM sleep. So less of that pretty architecture where you go through the different stages and chunks and more just flipping back and forth. And then dramatic decrease in the amount of deep sleep. Basically, to put it on a chart, you have a bad day, PTSD, anxiety, stress, whatever. That leads to that increase in norepinephrine and adrenaline. That norepinephrine and adrenaline is now going to keep you awake, so make it harder to fall asleep, causing more nightmares, more wake-ups for other reasons, so more time awake during the night and less deep sleep. So then what happens the next day? You don't have the serotonin and the dopamine, your adrenaline, norepinephrine get jacked up just to keep you going, and that's going to lead to more PTSD symptoms, hyperarousal, irritability, anger, all of those things. And round we go. So just about every major mental illness has sleep as part of the diagnostic criteria, part of the problems that go along with it. Depression is very similar. About 90% of patients with clinical depression also have insomnia. Depression is a risk factor for developing insomnia, but insomnia is also a risk factor for developing depression. Insomnia is actually an indicator for relapse, meaning that if you've been treated for depression and things are going well, a couple of nights of insomnia or poor sleep can actually predict you going back into a depressive episode. Higher levels of insomnia and depression are also related to increased intensity, so worse depressive symptoms, including suicidal thoughts or actions. We need that deep sleep to replenish the neurovesicles, like I had said before, replenish those chemicals that we need to feel okay. So we have a very similar cycle in depression and insomnia, and you can just run through the cycle. See a lot of the same differences, same changes to your sleep architecture in depression as you do in PTSD. I won't go through every one of these, but I wanted to show you because we all have substances, use substances, you know, military, it's always caffeine and whatever else to get you to sleep. So I wanted to show you that every chemical that can get into your brain has an effect on your sleep architecture. And most of them not good. So as an example, alcohol pretty much blocks deep sleep and it also suppresses REM sleep. So even though you feel like you can fall asleep better, maybe stay asleep, you're still not getting the deep sleep that you need to feel refreshed and restored. For any of you who do drink, when's the last time you had a couple too many and woke up feeling great? Well, that deep sleep deprivation is part of the reason why. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but you can see what other chemicals will do to that as well. Okay, I'll stop there. There are, to lead into my colleagues' talks here, there's a lot of interventions that we can make on the personal level, but also on the therapy or on the medicine level to help improve the sleep. So it's not a lost cause. Certainly you all are still here. So as bad as things may have been for you in the past, there is certainly still hope, and there's treatments and there's things that we can do. Simple and more complex things to help your sleep. All right, so thank you for your time.
So having this panel up here makes me look really smart. But let me clarify. If you ever watched the Saturday Night Live skit, I'm a caveman thought out by your scientists, right? I am a caveman up here with these absolutely incredibly intelligent individuals who are going to be able to go through these details. So I do want to bring it back to the audience, and we do have microphones. If you have questions, we'll bring them around and have you ask some of these questions. But I really want to lead off with a question that I have that really just got, I guess, sparked by something, Dr. Burke, that you brought up on the, for a year in Iraq, I was a company commander, CEO. If I got 3 hours of sleep a night, I was lucky. And I'm talking 12 months straight, because you're a CEO, you're a leader, right? Operating at that level. I mean, I think maybe one day in June of 2003, I think I might've got a full night's rest. So I can relate to what you're saying from that standpoint. Am I broke? I mean, it's just, what does that do? It obviously resets something in your sleep. So insomnia came up quite a bit there. And I know the panel, I'd like to throw this to you and Dr. Graskamp. I know you really do quite a bit of area, and then maybe the rest of the panelists as well. You're treating veterans primarily with insomnia and other cases. Can you talk about the treatment? Because that seems to be more once it's downstream, and then you're trying to get it back upstream, right, to get it almost preventative. So could you touch on that a little bit in the panel, talk about insomnia?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to. So I guess the question then comes, everybody here probably wants to know, well, what do I do? What's the next step, right? So there's a few slides and a few handouts for the people that are here in person that I brought along. There are really effective treatments, and actually we know that the gold standard in treatment is actually not medication treatment for insomnia. It's actually looking at cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is really a fancy way of saying breaking down specifically what's going on in the patterns of our sleep and everyone's sleep individually to figure out where sort of the mismatch is, why it sort of keeps going through that cycle. And there are some really good resources. There's an app that's available. It's free through either the Google Play or Apple App Store, which essentially is sort of a digital way of sleep logs. And you can use, there's one that's available to use with a provider, which is the one that's showing right now. And then there's also another one on the next slide, which is actually one that you can access and anyone can access. Any family members or friends that would like to work on their insomnia. It covers the same principles, but I would encourage you, if you use this app, to consider seeing somebody for extra help if you get stuck, if it seems like it's not progressing. Really, and it's hard to believe because people struggle with sleep for so long. I've seen Vietnam veterans who say, I've been struggling for how long? How long have these patterns have been going on? That a treatment that actually is 6 to 8 sessions, believe it or not, 6 to 8 weeks can actually get people reversed and expanding their sleep. So that's hard to believe, right? I mean, how many weeks, how many months, how many years have people struggled without knowing that some of these treatments are actually available? And cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is actually recommended by the American College of Physicians as the gold standard treatment. Because we know, medications, yes, people can use those. We just know that they don't tend to continue to work as effectively in the long term. And what's interesting about this treatment is once you learn how to sort of reverse those patterns, how to figure out, well, where is the hang up here in my sleep sort of breaking down. Once you learn that, even if you stop using some of those principles down the road, if you're like, wow, my sleep is really bad again, you can put them back into play and you can see your sleep improve again. It's really kind of a powerful thing.
I'm seeing a lot of head nods here, so throw it to the panel, I guess. Yep, you're good.
Vets are good at training, right? We get trained in everything that we do before we get in. Sleep is something that we get trained in sleep deprivation. This is like being trained in how to sleep again. So that's the way that I think of CBTI. And it is highly effective.
I'll add to that. What to do. I think the hardest part with reversing sleep stuff, what you're talking about, is it takes work. And that's why we end up going down the medication route, because that's the work that we're willing to do. So I'll have people come to my office say, I need to work on sleep. What are you willing to do? I'm not willing to do anything. Okay, well, it's the same thing is going to keep happening. So the CBTI and just some of the sleep hygiene things, it does take sacrifice to get it better. The good news is that sacrifice can get results. And there's no good time to change your sleep pattern. There's worse times. So if you're an accountant, don't pick April. That's terrible. If you're a parent, don't pick September because the kids are monsters. So find a time where you can be a little bit worse for a month or so, make that investment, and that's where a lot of people struggle. Like you got to take a step back to take a couple steps forward.
So you're almost like breaking a bad habit, right? I mean, again, I'm bringing it to layperson's terminology here. And they always say about 30 days, I think, to break or start a new positive routine, because then it becomes somewhat, is that kind of what you're saying when you say it's going to take work? And
yeah, really in that treatment, all the heavy lifting comes in the first couple weeks, right? Because you're trying to figure out how many hours do I actually sleep in any 24-hour period? And how many hours am I investing to get that sleep? Some people may lay in bed for 3 hours just waiting for exhaustion to finally come and take over, and they pass out. So you might invest 8 hours to get 4 hours of sleep. So if somebody said, I have an investment for you, give me $10, I'll give you $5 back at the end of the week. Probably wouldn't take that, right? So what we try and do is figure out how much sleep are you actually getting in a 24-hour span and try to get that efficiently. Try to compress that into as short a span as you can and then expand it out. It's kind of like breaking it down and building it back up. It's getting the sleep that your body is absolutely demanding at this moment and then stepping it out slowly so the body can adjust.
Please. It should be on.
So as a medical specialist, I just wanted to add something to balance that advice, which is that CBTI is absolutely the first line and the best treatment for insomnia. But it's important to talk to your provider about your complaint because sometimes your symptom of insomnia could be the result of side effect of a medication or some underlying health condition that needs to be evaluated. So, for example, if there's a thyroid disorder, if someone has, let's say, prostate hypertrophy, they have to get up multiple times at night to go to the bathroom, and now the sleep cycle is getting disturbed. So even in those conditions, CBTI helps. But if we don't treat that underlying disorder, or if there's a medication that's causing the side effect, and we don't take that away, then you would not get as much benefit from CBTI as you should. So I just wanted to throw in a word to make sure that you also get properly evaluated for other things that could be contributing to insomnia in addition to life experiences.
Yeah, and I want to point out also, between Aurora and the VA, 80% of our veterans do not use the VA. 80%, 80. That could be for a lot of different reasons. We're trying to move them in that direction. And I know the work that Greg and Eric are working on, they can see a broad span of veterans, first responders. I know you guys are doing quite a bit of work there because it's a very like society and culture, although there's a high percentage of our first responders who are prior service. But, and I know, just so everybody understands, this is all an effort to really kind of get a broad net out there to try to capture and work with a good number of our veterans in the community, because if what I'm understanding, and maybe this will be this, I'll throw this to the panelists, clearly post-traumatic stress and the conditions that are all associated all around that. We're on the task force working on the suicide prevention effort. Obviously, once it gets to that level, it's probably some of the most extreme. So there's a lot of things, as I like to say, upstream that can be addressed. And what I'm hearing here is potentially working on the sleep can make huge inroads in addressing and fixing. I don't know. Help me with what does this mean? I mean, I see a lot of nods, so I think I might have hit a spot.
I often refer to sleep as the great equalizer. I don't know many people who say they feel like they do math better, they concentrate better, they're in a better mood when their sleep is lower. I haven't. Okay, maybe some people feel a little punch drunk when they're sleep deprived. They're a little goofy, but other than that, like, yeah, for sure, you definitely there are absolutely effects from this every day when you're suffering with sleep.
And have you seen veterans that you're working with? They come in very much struggling, and then sleep. It's not all fixed with a little pill.
It's really surprising that with like specifically with that CBTI, to see somebody who struggled for 50 years with sleep problems come in and start tracking and look at it and break it down and put in the heavy lifting of saying, okay, I'm getting 5 hours of sleep. I'm going to spend 5 hours in bed, and then seeing their sleep efficiency go from 50%, paying back 50%, to paying back 85%, and then stepping it out 15 to 30 minutes a week as they go. And when you see somebody who struggled for 50 years with sleep come in and go, a month later, I'm getting an extra hour of sleep a night, and they're continuing. It's really rewarding, number one. But number two is, I often hear is, why didn't somebody tell me about this sooner? Right? Why isn't this widely distributed? And I think, to your point, is there's a lot of training that goes into sleep deprivation, and there's not as much training on sort of like, okay, here's how you go back to civilian life. Here's what you need in order to sort of readjust that idle speed or your sleep.
The thing I would add to that question, Dan, is the human body has a remarkable capability of correcting itself. So if I get a cut on my finger, my body does a ton of things to help me that I have no idea what it's doing. And when we get good sleep, we allow the body to heal itself. When we get poor sleep, we are continuing a cycle of destruction towards our body. And so, yeah, like for a lot of people with whatever diagnosis there is, if you improve sleep, it might just be enough to self-correct. And obviously, medical things need to be looked at. It's not going to be the end all be all, but a lot of things get self-corrected.
Make it a little over dramatic, but I'm very passionate about it.
Was Eric being a little over dramatic? Is that what you're saying, Dr.
First thing that I work on with any vet is sleep. We need to fix your sleep. We need to get you sleeping at least decently, because a lot of these things, whatever you're dealing with, depression, PTSD, other mood problems, will get better as your sleep improves. I can throw pills at you all day, but like our common antidepressants, really, they only work like fuel savers for that serotonin or that dopamine. If you don't have any fuel in the tank, it's not going to do anything. So one of the common SSRIs that's prescribed for PTSD and depression is one of these selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, fancy word for fuel saver for serotonin. And like I said, it's not as effective in PTSD because of the insomnia. Once you treat the insomnia, then those medications even can start working like they're supposed to.
So as we're discussing this, are there any questions? Oh, yeah. So what I'll do, because we're having problems with that mic, if you want to say the question, and then I'll repeat it on here so the folks who are Zooming in, our Zoomies can hear the question. So good to see you, Tiffany, by the way. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. Oh, cool.
And I just want to follow up. I know what else is melatonin good for, and what is it just I heard you say like 3 milligrams per night, but somebody like me on the age 50, what else is that good for?
She said the age. So I'll repeat make sure I get it right. The question on, I guess, proper milligrams of melatonin and that, and what else is it good for? So panelists, could be anybody. Yeah.
So in the world of sleep medicine, we don't really treat melatonin as a sleeping pill. It works better on the circadian physiology to help us time our sleep. So, the way we have evolved over millions of years on Earth, all living beings, we've had the natural daytime light, and then we would have darkness. And we became either diurnal animals who mostly are active during the day, or we became nocturnal animals, and plants and other things, but talking about animals since we belong to the animal kingdom, who are more active at night. So our physiology learned to adapt to that cycle, light and dark cycle. So naturally, as sunlight would go down at dusk, melatonin would start going up. And that was a signal internally to the body in response to the light going down that now it's time for rest, restoration, and sleep. So now with the modern, lifestyle, especially with the exposure of light that we have till late at night, and other reasons that maybe we have circadian rhythm disorders, we use melatonin mostly to try to realign our circadian rhythm to our day-night cycles, to our daily routines. So in sleep medicine, most commonly, melatonin is used to realign the circadian rhythm. Now, at high doses, it has a little bit of that sleepiness, that tiredness effect. And some people find it helpful. So it could be used as a sleeping pill, but it's not something that we recommend commonly. And for that slight sleepiness effect, it tends to happen at higher doses. But the effect on the circadian rhythm, it happens as low as 0.3 or 0.5 milligrams. So the only problem is that the over-the-counter medications, you don't really know if it says 1 milligram or 3 milligram, how much is in there. So when you take the over-the-counter medications, which are not very properly calibrated, you may not know the exact dose that you're getting. But in terms of what dose you need, as low as 0.5 milligrams, which commercially is not really available, is enough to align your circadian rhythm. And then clinically, we tend to use more in the range of 3 or 5 milligrams because that is more commonly available over the counter, but not really what is needed. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Kind of.
I certainly.
Yep. So for our online audience, once your sleep cycle is back, I guess in sync would be a term, right? Do you stop taking the melatonin?
It depends on the underlying condition. So let's say someone was doing shift work and they're having difficulty sleeping at a time, which is not their natural sleep time. As long as they're doing shift work, they might need melatonin to help them with that. But let's say someone has a temporary change, they're traveling a lot and they're jet lagged during the time, they need to realign their circadian rhythm fast. But once they come back to their usual routine, they don't need it. Now, there are some people who have inbuilt circadian rhythm disorders. For example, there are some people who are night owls, and no matter how hard they try, they cannot fall asleep before 12 or 2 in the morning, and they have a tough time waking up before 10 or even noon, 10 a.m. or noon. So you might need it lifelong, potentially, along with, of course, some very strong discipline related to your sleep routine, because even with the use of melatonin, any occasional late night will predispose your body to slipping into that night owl mode, because that's the easiest mode for your body to fall into.
And us who are over that age of 50, as we saw the calcification in that CAT scan, I guess that's if it's not producing. But Dr. Burke? Yeah.
I will second everything that my colleague said. Certainly she is the expert. The way that I believe that all vets have a built-in circadian rhythm problem. It's called, military service. So you can realign that circadian rhythm. Generally, just what I recommend is 3 milligrams or less. If you're feeling groggy or sedated still in the morning, like you're feeling like it's still nighttime, I should be sleeping, then that's too much, and pull back on it. So even half of one of those would be good. There was a study that took your different melatonin pills and actually tested how much melatonin's in them, and it varied everywhere from 83% less than advertised to over 400% more than advertised. So you have to find a brand that's reputable. There are some brands that do their own internal quality testing or have a third party do their quality testing. So those will at least be more consistent. But what I usually say is for about 3 weeks, you need about 3 weeks to fully reset the clock. So if you're going to take melatonin to fix the circadian rhythm, you take it at the same time every night for 3 weeks, whether you're going to bed or not, really, because it's about resetting the clock, not about the sleep per se. But at the same time, doing the things that would naturally increase your melatonin production, like light discipline, doing more of the education around sleep and more of the CBTI or the sleep hygiene type practices that are going to help your brain to make its own. That way, when we reset the clock, now you can maintain the clock even after you come off taking the melatonin as a pill. The pill is never going to be as good as your own brain's melatonin for a bunch of different reasons, but that's kind of the too long of a short answer for you.
Well, and what we had hoped to do when we set today up was, this is the start of the conversation. We want this to be an access point for you if you have questions or want to learn more. Clearly, we're not going to solve all the issues here this evening on this talk, but at least, and then we'll make sure you have contact information. So if you can use the VA or obviously Aurora. Peter, yes.
When beginning with sleep, how many veterans that need help with sleep? You ask them if they need to be, say, on a CPAP machine at night, because without a CPAP, you wake up like 30, 40 times a night. It happened to me. I found out I have sleep deprivation and went to God for about 15 years ago.
So were you reading my notes? Peter, were you reading my notes? No, that's a great, because we were going to talk about sleep apnea, because you just talked to CPAP. You were psychic. So the question for those online was tied to sleep apnea or the CPAP. So Dr. Rajashan, we had talked about sleep apnea in an area of your expertise, and I'm not taking away from the rest of the panelists, but I know we had talked about that. So what are some of these, again, also to Peter's point on the CPAP, right, and how is that all tied? Can you explain that and its impact and treatment and getting quality sleep?
Sure. So sleep apnea, for those who may not know about it, is a disease condition in which obstructive sleep apnea is a disease condition in which when we lie down to sleep, the throat kind of narrows down to the degree that air has difficulty getting in and out through the throat into the lungs and out of the lungs into the air. It can be narrow to the degree that the airflow goes down a lot, or sometimes it stops completely for a few seconds at a time. And when you're talking about waking up multiple times, every time that happens, the brain recognizes that airflow is either limited or not happening, and then it has an arousal. You may or may not realize that you are waking up because that arousal may just happen for 2 or 3 seconds, or it would be an awakening where you would know that you're waking up at night and you're not sure why you're waking up, or maybe you wake up with a gasp or a snore. So this interrupts the quality of your sleep. It doesn't let you go into deep sleep. Also, every time the arousal happens, your adrenaline is going up and your blood pressure is going up and your heart rate is going up. So it is stimulating your system, whereas sleep is a time when everything is supposed to calm down. So it causes, first of all, not continuous sleep. So a lot of interruption in sleep. It prevents deep sleep. A lot of times it also prevents REM sleep, which is associated with the processing of emotions. So again, in people with PTSD, the emotional processing is one of the problems, right? We're stuck in that particular emotion. It doesn't get properly processed. And there is a thought, it's not been proven, that any problems with REM sleep can add to that. So it has interruptions of all these important parts of sleep. And because it's causing your adrenaline to surge, it creates risk for heart disease and hypertension, arrhythmia, stroke, even diabetes potentially in the long run. So when we treat this with CPAP, the pressure from the CPAP opens up the throat. So now there's no reason for your brain to keep waking you up because the airflow is happening continuously, and you get your continuous sleep as well as deeper amounts of sleep, and then your blood pressure, heart rate, adrenaline levels also tend to stay lower, so it cuts down the risk for all those diseases in the future. Was that your question? Or, okay.
Veterans have an unusually high amount of sleep apnea. So if you're waking up from snoring, if you're waking up with a dry mouth, if you're waking up with that morning headache, like right after you wake up, those would be some of the signs. If you're sleepy during the day as well, like you just can't keep your eyes open if you got 5 minutes of downtime, those would be signs that you may have sleep apnea, and that is something that can be tested for. When people are treated for their sleep apnea properly, it also helps with the PTSD symptoms and some of the other symptoms of disorders because of that link, because of the little shots of adrenaline that you're getting during the night to wake you up to take a breath. That's going to increase the awakenings, arousals, increase your daytime PTSD symptoms, but also the nighttime ones like nightmares. So that would be another way of addressing your PTSD as well, is to get tested and treated for a sleep apnea if that's part of the problem.
Have there been questions coming in via Zoom via the chat? Okay, question in the back, please. So if I heard correctly, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. I know this is, I'm sure, I probably was seeing a bunch of heads nod off my periphery because I know this has been talked before. So, and how does that impact the ability for fixing sleep? So go ahead, please.
Yeah, so what Greg was talking about in the presentation is that, we just have this norepinephrine, this adrenaline is going up. Even sleep apnea, right? It sparks that. So when we're engaging in these relaxation techniques, is basically what you're talking about, a lot of different kinds, we're teaching our body to down-regulate. And that is, like we talked about, training and retraining. Our bodies have forgotten how to do that, right? So naturally, we kind of go into fight or flight very quickly, and we get into rest and digest slowly. So the more we practice these more regulating relaxation things, we're teaching our body to get into rest and digest quicker. So somebody who's done it the first time, it's like blowing up a balloon the first time. It doesn't want to take. It takes longer. The more we do it, the easier it is to do. And your body our brains are association creatures. So once you have done diaphragmatic breathing for a couple of years, your body and your brain are like, oh, we're doing that thing again. We'll start calming down. So you're training your body to kind of downregulate quicker. And then obviously it's easier to go into sleep. Your body also knows how to stay in that downregulated area longer. So you're more likely to stay asleep as well.
And Greg, before we throw it to you, Dr. Rajashan, we're going to try a little bit of that here at the end, right? Is that correct? So I know we said an hour. I really don't want to stop the conversation because it seems to be going pretty well. But at the very end, we're actually going to do one of those exercises so you can learn. And I see Mr. Stallman, thank you so much. Mr. Verlo, thank you again. So I saw you sneak in here a short while ago. So I just wanted to say thank you again. All right, Dr. Burke.
That was a great question, and thank you for asking it. That is the training on how to relax. We all need to relax. Sleep is a state of being relaxed. Your whole metabolism slows down and everything else. So learning how to relax again is the training or the retraining that we need when we get out. Another point, just as an example, is that when your adrenaline is up, you're hyper aroused, you tend to breathe faster. So when you're breathing at a faster rate, hyperventilating, you're blowing off all your carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide has a calming effect on the body. So you remember that old adage, if you're like hyperventilating, you should breathe into a bag. That's so that you rebreathe your carbon dioxide. And as that rises in your blood, it can actually have a calming effect. So that would be one example of how that stuff helps as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention too the guided imagery that you mentioned. So oftentimes when we are used to not sleeping in bed, when we're used to tossing and turning for hours, and we can sometimes even thinking about going to bed can be a stressful thing. Like instead of looking forward to going to bed, we may have the thought, oh great, what am I in for tonight? So one of the things that happens like with guided imagery is you can listen to an exercise and it sort of paints a picture of all these different sort of images and sensory experiences. Like somebody might describe walking on a beach. What sounds do you hear? How does the sand feel on your feet or that kind of thing? It engages the mind, and that works because our brains don't listen to us when we tell them, stop thinking about that. As much as we wish they would listen, if I asked everybody in here right now to imagine a blank white wall, and I said, think of anything but a pink elephant, the image that pops in your head is a pink elephant. But I just told you, don't think about a pink elephant. So what we have to do is actually direct our brain to something else, direct our brain to paying attention to one of these guided imagery exercises so the body can really do what it wants to do, which is go to sleep.
It also adds to that sleep routine. Sleep is very much about routine, and the things that you do before sleep are giving your brain cues that it's supposed to be shutting off. So you can't just go right from doing your taxes or whatever, really engaging mental activity, to off. It doesn't work like that. So the more of these steps you can add, the more of these less thought, more relaxing kind of behaviors that you can have before sleep, the more your brain is going to start to cue that it's time to start turning off.
So just to add to what has been said, as Dr. Grascam said, we can't control our brain directly. If thoughts are running wild, if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling a little bit sort of just a little tight, it's hard to let go. So usually we get to the brain indirectly. So if we focus on the breathing, if there's guided imagery, what happens is it works as a distraction for the brain. Now the brain has been given something else to focus on, so it's able to let go of all that worrying and ruminating and, that sense of whatever emotion there might be, that if we tell our brain, just let go, okay, stop worrying, stop thinking about that. It's not going to do that, but if you focus on your breathing, automatically, now that you have something else to do, it's easier for the brain to let go. And just like what's happening in the brain affects our body. So if I'm feeling anxious, my blood pressure will go up, my heart rate will go up. There are certain muscles in my body that will become tight. So what happens in my brain affects my body. But what happens in my body also affects my brain. So if I'm trying to relax my brain and I cannot do that directly, but I focus on relaxing my muscles or I focus on relaxed breathing, now I'm able to access in the opposite direction by doing physical things which then affect the state of the brain and the.
You took the words right out of my mouth. So we have 2 points of intervention. You can try to intervene at the body. You can try to intervene at the brain. You can try both. So if something's not working, try the other one. That's why, we talk about things like, a warmer bath or shower, something like that. Like it's going to decrease arousal of the body. And then that can help the brain slow down. Just like some things we do, if I read, I'm slowing down my brain, my body slows down. So you want to experiment with different things that work for your body and your brain. And then when needed, you throw them all in the kitchen sink when you need a good night's sleep.
I would add that the same thing is true for PTSD. If the mind is racing, sometimes even trying to write that sentence forces our brain to slow down because we have to finish that thought. We actually have to write it out. So we can think of 1,000 miles an hour, but sometimes just even putting pen to paper helps to meter the speed at which we can think.
So I've got just a kind of a quick finish question and then say this is the first time that someone's come to you, they've come to your office and said, I need help with sleep. Can we just a quick panel response, like right out of the blocks? I know it depends, right? It depends on the individual, but like, what are some first steps? Just real quick. And maybe you've touched on it already, but again, I'm a caveman thought out by your scientist here. So keep it real simple for me. How do you do this? How do you handle this?
First thing I say, Google sleep hygiene.
Google sleep hygiene.
And do some of those things. I mean, like that's the first thing that I will say.
Okay, so okay, while you guys are thinking about your response, while I was trying to prepare for this panel of really smart people to be here, and I'm up here talking with them, I started to Google sleep and sleep problems, and a name, Andrew Huberman, came up. And I don't know if that name sounds familiar, but he's all over YouTube. And I found it very, very interesting to listen to what he was saying. And I'm like, I'm really looking forward to now having 4 experts sitting on a panel. But, there's a lot of things he was talking about, not just PTSD and military and veterans, right? He was talking in general terms. But a lot of what you were saying today was there, but also the screens, because we live on these things. And years ago, I'm talking years ago, there's no television in our bedroom. That's not how we shut off. We shut off by lights off, and maybe I might read, but I'm reading, and it's amber light, I believe, Dr. Burke, is what you've recommended, because that helps trigger melatonin, I believe is what you said. I'm putting words in the doctor's mouth here, but how you also interact. But one of the things that also Andrew Huberman talked about is when you wake up, do not go to those screens right away either, because this is about resetting your stressors in your life. Is there an item there? Because this is something that not only everybody should be sleeping every day, we know, especially Americans, humans are interacting with these things all the time too.
Your brain is especially sensitive to light, the circadian rhythm at night. So if the light that you're getting in your eyes is worse for your sleep when it's in the nighttime. You need light in the morning in order to wake up. And your brain has both the sleep clock when you're supposed to go to bed, but it has a wake up alarm clock in it too. Like how many wake up a couple minutes before their alarm? Yeah, because your brain's picturing when you turn the lights on, you're resetting your alarm clock. Your brain is less sensitive to light in the morning, so you need more light. In that case, the screens are not enough. And we're coming into the time of the year where it's not going to be bright enough outside. Believe it or not, even on an overcast day, there's more light outside than you can get from a screen or from overhead lighting. So if you can get 20 minutes, half an hour of natural light in the morning, that helps to set that wake up clock as well. That's another way of resetting your circadian rhythm.
So it's not just about falling asleep, it's waking up. It's kind of completing the cycle, is what I heard. Yeah.
As much as we wish we could will ourselves to sleep, If that were the case, we wouldn't have anybody in the audience right now. We can't will ourselves to sleep, but we can set alarms and have people call us and remind us and get up at the same time every day. And guess what? Even if you're exhausted, if you get up, anchoring that as your wake time helps to anchor that 24-hour cycle too. Yeah, and going out for a nice walk and getting some sunshine, exercise, and activity is also a good way to anchor the start of that day.
Your brain has backup clocks. Your brain and body have backup clocks in case you can't get enough light. Exercise is one of them. When you first eat is another one. They're nowhere near as good as the light control is for resetting your circadian rhythm. But the more you can kind of stack these clues or cues for both sleep and for waking up, that's the whole point of the sleep hygiene. And CBTI has a lot to do with following those kind of guidelines as well. The more you can stack these things, the more you can actually fix that circadian rhythm. True. So, yeah.
The other thing that I would just recommend, besides Googling, I realize that's a cop-out answer, is get a device to track your sleep. You know, Apple Watches, Fitbit.
So the new watches
Yeah.
they have, is the jury still out on those, or is that how you tracked yours when you showed that sleep pattern up there, Dr. Burke?
That was from my own Fitbit. So that was my own.
Got it. Okay.
They are relatively accurate. They're nowhere near as good as an EEG, putting the leads on your head, because they're tracking your movement. So there's a couple ways that can get messed up. For one is bed partners and pets are good at increasing
Or
movement.
weighted blankets?
Right? Weighted blankets are good at slowing the movement.
Yeah, there you go. See, that's why we did
But
that.
the other big thing that you might have seen up on that chart at the end with the medications and the other substances, alcohol, for example, is a muscle relaxer. So even though it looks like you're getting a bunch of deep sleep, it's actually because it's shutting down your muscle movement. It's blocking your deep sleep. So there's a couple of little caveats to it like that. But unless you're planning on buying an EEG machine and putting on your head every night, it's a pretty good surrogate just to kind of track how are we doing over weeks or months.
So if you want to make a problem better, you need to get a better idea of the problem. And so it's another piece of data besides just how rested you are or other things like that. Get more data.
Yep. So I just want to look to the audience. Oh, so I want to make sure we've got all our questions covered. So go ahead. Yes, please.
So that's a follow-up on that question. I do now watch and I have to track my sleep. So in a world where land of unicorns and rainbows.
So at some point she brought Land of Unicorn and Rainbows, and I don't know if I'll be able to remember this whole question here.
It's not that you're dying, but that would be a sign of sleep apnea. So that's something that you should get checked out for.
So the question was length of quality sleep. I'll say quality sleep, and then the oxygen
So
question.
just to be clear, I don't want to scare you all. It's not like one bad night it's not literally going to kill you. It's just going to be a bad day the next day. So, and we've had plenty of bad nights that we've recovered from. If you think of your brain more like a fuel tank, and that deep sleep is that refueling time, then generally the more you get, the more you're filling the tank. I would say, or my goal personally, is about 90 minutes of deep sleep. I know that that's going to pretty much refuel my brain as much as I need. So if you're getting 90 minutes of deep sleep, awesome. Well done, everybody. But if you're getting only 60 or 30 or 20, you're still putting $5 in the tank. It's going to get you so far. And what we want to see is that increasing over time. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question? Okay.
Oh, we do have one. Yes, please. So the question of 90 minutes,
Oh, yeah.
go to the question of the total 90 minutes of the deep sleep, correct? Is that the question, or is that the phase?
That would be a goal.
That'd be a goal.
It doesn't have to be that every night. Deep sleep is hard to get. The best anybody could possibly do is about 25%. Most people are more like 15, 20% of the night is going to be deep sleep. The reason that 8 hours is so important is if you follow that percentage, you need the 8 hours to get up to the hour or 90 minutes of the deep sleep. So
George, and Mr. Banda.
For someone who's way past 50.
So for those online, for someone who's way past 50. To reverse the calcification of the gland.
Usually calcification, once it occurs somewhere in the body, it is very hard to change that. However, as a general rule, it's not that everyone needs melatonin as they get older. There are different kinds of cues that the body uses. So, exercise, the timing of the meals, exposure to sunlight. So these are the ways that we can orient our brain to time of day and night and time for sleep.
your pineal gland is still functional. It's just going to make less melatonin. So following the same rules, you're still going to get some. You can still maintain a normal circadian rhythm. It's just it's harder. So calcification, that pineal gland turning into bone, is a normal part of the aging process. And being aware of that emphasizes how important following the sleep hygiene and things like that are. It's not, again, it's not that it's going to kill you. It's just that now we need to focus on this more.
One of the things that help me sleep is sound of rain.
White noise or whatever they call that, right? Use of white noise.
Yep. So the gentleman mentioned that one thing that helps him with sleep is background noise. Certainly for vets and certainly for people with PTSD, small noises are very disruptive. Because every little noise, it's kind of like you got to identify, what was that? I got to go check the house now. I'm going to go check the doors, whatever. So a little bit of background noise, something that's very low tone, soothing. Water noises do a good job. So rain or waves or something like that covers a lot of those small background noises. So it's not everyone, you're not getting that little shot of adrenaline saying, oh, what was that? What was that? So absolutely, I'd recommend something along that line. You don't want rock music. You don't want anything that's gonna, anything that's actually gonna work you up. But definitely having background noise. I know that a lot of people try and use TV. They're like, oh, I don't really watch TV in bed. I just use it for background noise. The noise thing, great. The light thing, terrible. So no TVs in the bedroom. Use your phone with a little like a sound app on it, or they have the little noise makers for kids. Any of those things are great for sleep.
And I would add it's great for if you have ringing in the ears and tinnitus too. Having that background so that there is less contrast between the sound in the ringing and the quiet can be really helpful.
It also gives your brain something else to focus on. I'm sorry, but on that same thing with you can't tell your brain to shut off. All you can do is tell it what to pay attention to.
So it's kind of that channeling, you're channeling positive. Okay.
Sorry.
And
This is a sign.
wow, there we go. We do have a backup here.
Going. I just wanted to quickly get back to your question about percentage of deep sleep. So in general, what we consider the non-REM deep sleep is roughly 15 to 20%. Now, as we get older, it tends to decrease over time. And REM sleep, which is also considered, deep sleep, there are deep sleep aspects to it. That's 15 to 25% of the total sleep that we get at night. And again, both of these tend to decrease as we get older, more so with the non-REM deep sleep than with the rapid eye movement deep sleep. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the numbers per se. It's really more the effect. And there can be a lot of individual variations between people. And sometimes, so I once saw young patient in clinic who came because he was feeling very sleepy and sluggish throughout the day. And as I talked to him, I found out that most of his life, he had been sleeping around 6 to 6.5 hours, had been doing really well. And then he heard on TV that you should be getting 8 hours of sleep for health. So he started trying to sleep for 8 hours, which just made him very sluggish and tired because he didn't need it. For him, 6.5 was enough. Now, caveat to that, generally speaking, most people need 7 to 8, 6.5 is rare, but he was one of the true short sleepers. So when he forced himself to sleep longer, he actually had side effects from it. And so my treatment for him was go back to your 6.5 hours, and he hopefully lived happily ever after. I don't know, but he didn't come back to clinic. So the numbers are rough guidelines, but you don't want to chase numbers too much. You know whether something's working for you based on how you feel in your body. You know, if it's unhealthy, usually.
And I just want to remind everybody, we are recording this. And so we will post it on our YouTube page. Please share this. If you want to go back to it as another reference point for yourself, great. I think I don't know about you, I think this has just been amazing and really touching a lot of different points. And it's not just searching a Google search and not knowing what you're getting on the back end. We know this has been legitimized. I know there's a question here, but you have Dr. Burke and a follow up to that.
I just wanted to add one comment onto that, is that there is a genetic variation for short sleepers, but it's less than 0.1%.
Less than 21%. Yeah.
So certainly not all veterans are genetically short sleepers. It's more likely to get hit by lightning than for you to be genetically short sleeper. I think most of us are shooting for that 8.
Most people like to believe that 6.5 hours is what they are good with, but most people are not. So sorry, most people like to believe that 6.5 hours is enough for them, but that's not true for majority of us. But 7 is usually good for most of us, but some people need 8. And the best way to know, you kind of have a sense how much sleep you need to feel good for the day. But if you think you need 9 or 10 hours, that's not right either. So it's somewhere between 7 to 8.5.
Okay, yes.
What is your thought on light therapy?
It can certainly be helpful. We all do need the light. There's specific variations of depression like seasonal affect disorder where it's prescribed, a lamp is prescribed. It's not going to hurt you as long as you're not using it at night, But I think that generally we all need more light in the morning, especially going into a Wisconsin winter. Like we need to be what's the word? Intent. We need to have that intention. We need to be paying specific attention to how much light we can get in the morning, and again, turn them off at night.
And I see there's a question in the back. I just want to touch on this because of some, Dr. Ratarasarn, you touched on this too. When we were more of I remember reading about this. I'm more of a historian. I mean, that's my background. And you look at our agrarian societies, and then the invention of electricity, right? We're talking 100 years, really. And so we're living a new era. So just remove the combat side of things and the sleep deprived and such, just in general, the population. And I recall watching a study once on how long back when we were farmers and living on farms, the sun went down, that's it. And you don't get up till the sun goes up. And so really they would even have like double lives in the middle of that. I remember reading that and going, that makes sense, because what would you do? I mean, you're not always running around with a candle or a chunk of wood that's on fire unless you're going after Frankenstein, I guess.
If it wasn't for screens and interior lighting, the average adult would be going to bed at 8 or 8:30 and sleep until 4:35 in the morning. It's really 2 to 3 hours after sunset is our most natural sleep time. If it wasn't for screens and interior lighting, most adults' natural sleep time, other than the genetic night owls, would be about 8 or 8:30 at night. We'd all be going to bed about that time. And we'd be waking up about 4:30 or 5. So very farm type living.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you, Mr. Edison and everybody else for messing up our lives, I guess. Did you have a question in back as well? So I'll repeat that for veterans with PTSD. What's the average sleep? So this would kind of go back to the program and individualizing the therapy for those individuals, right?
I mean, this is gonna be anecdotal because I'll tell you what I see, right? I've seen veterans have 3 hours of sleep a night on average for decades. I've seen that. Rarely will you see the person who's getting the 7, because what we said is if you're getting the 7 or 8, that self-healing process is probably taking place and they're not coming into your office as much. So typically it would be like that 3 to 5 is probably what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think 90% of the people that we see through the clinic where we screen for concussion that I work in, I would say between 3 and 6 hours, but probably the vast majority between 4 and 5.
And then there's a lot of whole lot of interrupted
Yes.
between that time, but no solid REM sleep.
Yep. She added to that there's a lot of interrupted sleep, a lot of broken sleep. So veterans specifically have sleep issues, and that's because we were trained for sleep deprivation. So a lot of the vets that I'll see, if I just ask, how's your sleep? Oh, it's fine. Okay, well, what does fine mean? I get 4 or 5 hours a night. It's like, I'm good to go. Fine is a 4-letter word. It means that you're mission ready or mission capable, and that's good. But it doesn't mean that you're not having problems. So yeah, we have to ask more questions about, well, what does fine look like? When are you going to bed? How many times are you waking up? When do you wake up and get up for the day? Are you feeling rested? So there's a whole list of good questions that we can ask to really dig into what some of the sleep problems are. But I would say that certainly some selection bias, as in the people with more trouble are going to be the ones coming to see us. 3 to 6, yeah. And some of that is broken up. You may be up for an hour or 2 at night and then back. And even of those who are getting the 6 or 7 or even 8 hours, how's the quality of that sleep? If you got the broken circadian rhythm, you're not going to get the quality out of your sleep you need. And that's a different issue. So yeah, it's a lot of different questions, a lot of individual variation, but fine is not good.
So as we start going into and we can still address this point, but can we bring up the next slides? So we start to go into the breathing exercise. So to do a wrap on this, Dr. Ratarasarn will be taking us through a session. Would you like to come up here? And is that okay? You can come up. We didn't talk that, and then we'll have here we go. Step 1, if you can, and by the way, I'm drinking my caffeine too, by the way, Dr. Burke. So.
Well, you can tell us at the end whether it worked in spite of your caffeine. Yeah. So the technique that I will just guide you through is called alternate nostril breathing. And, I'm trained in yoga and Ayurveda, and the way it's explained in those fields is that you are using the alternate nostril to stimulate each side of the brain, right? And this is trying to balance and improve the connectivity between the 2 sides of the brain. And because we are breathing slowly while we're doing this exercise, it also helps with the relaxation and calming the brain down. So multiple roles that it has. So we will be breathing through 1 nostril at a time. You would be using the right hand, right thumb to cover the right nostril when we breathe through the left, and then the ring finger and small finger to cover the other nostril when we are breathing through the right. The middle 2 fingers, you can either fold, right, and go like this, Or you can put some people like to put the middle two fingers here, and they find it kind of a little bit calming to have it rested here and then using the other two sides for the alternate nostril breathing. So the way we are going to do this is either keep it folded or put your your index and middle finger here. Now take a deep breath and slowly, all the way into your belly, right down to your tailbone, and then cover your right nostril, breathe out through the left, all the way out slowly, and then breathe in through the left, and cover your left nostril, open your right, breathe out through the right. Breathe in through the right, cover it, breathe out through the left. Breathe in through the left, cover, breathe out through the right. Breathe in, deep, slow, all the way down to the belly. Cover, breathe out through the left. Breathe in, cover, out through the right, in through the right, out through the left, in through the left. And now do it on your own, slowly, gently, just letting the air flow in and out. You'll do it for another 1 minute. And whenever you're done, you end on the right side. And I'll let you know when the 1 minute is over, but if you want to stop before that, you can. Whenever you're done on the right side, you can stop. So this was just about, I think, 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes total. The way you can calm your brain down with this exercise even more is that in between the breathing in and breathing out, you can pause for a second. So for example, breathe in, pause, and then the other side, breathe out, pause, breathe in, pause. So just having that pause for barely a second, again, works on slowing your brain down and calming the brain down. So that's an easy exercise that can work like meditation, breathing meditation, or a relaxation. And the important thing is to not force the air in and out. You have to think about letting the air flow in and out and letting the belly relax to allow the air to flow all the way down. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
If someone is dealing with tinnitus as well as PTSD, but sometimes tinnitus is overwhelming. You need the background noise in order to drown it out. So if you're using television or if you're using natural sounds, that still causes your brain to be active. So what would you suggest?
Do you mean breathing technique, or in general, what would be the best ways? Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it is hard to distract the brain depending on the degree of tinnitus without some other sound in the background to sort of at least damp it down a little bit, if not be able to ignore it completely. So white noise, or someone had mentioned things like nature sounds, etc. Those can be used in the background to try to sort of take away the sounds related to tinnitus. When it comes to breathing exercise, it's also a question of, if you have tinnitus, how much are you able to pull your brain away from it? And so doing the breathing exercise can just help with that part. Now, the more you practice something, the better you get at it. So in the beginning, let's say you're trying to do breathing relaxation exercise, trying to take your mind away from focusing on the tinnitus. In the beginning, it will be a struggle because you're not used to doing that. But the more you practice, the more your brain will become used to focusing on the breathing and being able to pull away from the focus on tinnitus. I'm sure there are other therapies that our team would know better.
Yeah, and I think an added component to the breathing, that helps is that our heart and our lungs work really well together. I mean, we don't have to think about increasing our heart rate and our respiration rate when we're walking up the stairs, right? It does it automatically. So we're sort of reversing that process and getting a back door into the nervous system. By slowing down the breathing, by getting lots of oxygen, that sends messages to our heart. Hey, you've got plenty of what you need. You got plenty of oxygen. You mustn't have any major stuff going on right now because you've got plenty. You're not under that stress. So it's sort of a backdoor way into the nervous system. And there are nerve fibers that go from our heart to our brain. We always think our brain's running things, but our heart actually sends messages to our brain that we have what we need. And it fosters that sense of calm, that peacefulness that helps us wind down. And in addition to the breathing, we mentioned sort of earlier that guided imagery kind of exercise where listening to these sort of detailed described scenes, or everyone probably has one. If you think back, at some point in your life, a lot of people pick nature scenes, but those things where if you think back to a vacation or a time where you really were feeling calm and peaceful, what was the weather like then? Were there any scents in the air? What did the sun feel like on your skin? That kind of thing. Like those are really intense sort of physical experiences, but it takes the mind off of the extra sort of sound, the tinnitus, and it also allows the brain to relax. Even though it's listening to something, it allows us to give in to that sort of urge to sleep. And here's the thing, from earlier I mentioned you can't force ourselves to sleep. The only thing that precedes falling asleep is feeling sleepy. Not fatigued, not I'll watch this program because the remote's on that table and I don't want to get up and change it. Not fatigue, but sleepiness. That's that feeling when your eyes get heavy, when you're feeling like you want to nod. That's the only thing that precedes it. And these relaxation exercises allow you to sort of let your body get distracted and keep those thoughts from racing and paying attention to the annoying sounds of like tinnitus and allowing the body to just down-regulate and give in to that urge to sleep.
So I just want to say thank you to our panelists. I know you have had a very busy time. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed, sorry. Oh, there you go. So service connected with tinnitus or tinnitus, I guess, I've heard it both ways, yeah. And that the VA did issue you a machine that does the white noise, so, yep.
The audiology department is fantastic. I actually do a class to help people deal with tinnitus with the audiology department as well.
So again, please, if you have any follow-on questions, you've been very generous with your time. And I know all of you are extremely busy right now treating and caring for our veterans. So we appreciate the time that you've provided us. to be here today. Again, this was recorded. It will be on our YouTube, of course, if you have cards and such, if folks are asking. And then, of course, Dirk, thank you so much, Burlo, and the weighted sleep blankets. That was very generous, very, very generous. So thank you. We look to do more series and events and activities as we go forward. And we just had a call today. We're looking in February with this task force on suicide prevention to do a resource fair tied to services from hunting trips and kayak and fishing and et cetera. They approached and said, all these groups are looking to give these services to our veterans. They struggle with trying to connect with veterans. And so we are working with the task force to secure a date to be determined in February, where we'll be hosting a resource fair here with all these entities and these organizations that are literally looking to give these services as rec services provided to them in February. So, so please stay tuned on that. And so we continue to try to do this in service. So again, thank you, and everybody online. Thank you for joining us today. So take care.